Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going into the activist archives to explore the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
We've got kind of a fascinating mix of materials for this one.
Oh, cool.
We've got his Wikipedia page, we've got a YouTube clip of a Canadian politician paying tribute, and we've got an article from the History Channel about his written works.
Sounds interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how all these kind of different sources illuminate his journey. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm also I'm curious what surprises we might find.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's start. Let's just start with the Wikipedia deep dive.
Okay.
And right away, we learned something pretty interesting about his name.
Okay.
His birth name was Rolilala.
Okay.
It's an ex-Xhosa name. But the spelling of ex-Xhosa names has actually changed since he was in school.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a great point. It reminds us that language is always kind of evolving, right?
Yeah.
And even something as basic as a name can reflect those shifts over time.
Yeah, totally. So Rolilala Mandela was born in a small village called Mvezo in South Africa. To avoid arranged marriages, he and his cousin Justice ran away to Johannesburg as teenagers.
Wow.
Talk about taking your destiny into your own hands, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's a pretty bold move, especially back then. I mean, think about the social constraints of the time. And that escape led him to his first encounter with South African capitalism, working as a night watchman at Crown Mines.
I mean, that must have been a pretty stark introduction to the realities of apartheid, right?
Yeah.
Seeing the system firsthand like that.
Absolutely. Working at the mines, exposed him to the exploitation of black labor and the deep inequalities that were just kind of woven into the fabric of South African society at the time.
Totally. So around this time, he met Walter Sisulu. Walter Sisulu became a lifelong friend and a key figure in the African National Congress, or the ANC.
Right.
Sisulu helped him get a job as a clerk at a law firm. It was run by Lazar Sadelsky,
Okay.
who was a liberal Jew who was sympathetic to the ANC's cause.
Interesting. That's a good reminder that, even within the white community, there were people who recognized the injustice of apartheid and were willing to kind of, support the movement for change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was at this firm that Mandela formed some of his first interracial friendships, including Gaura Debe, who was part of both the ANC and the Communist Party,
Yeah.
and Nat Bregman, who was a Jewish communist who became Mandela's first white friend.
Wow.
So it was a real, melting pot of ideas there.
Yeah.
He started attending Communist Party gatherings, observing their discussions on class struggle and equality.
Okay.
But he never officially joined.
There are, differing opinions on why he didn't join the Communist Party. Some say it was due to his Christian faith.
Right.
And his belief that the South African struggle was primarily about race, not just class.
Right. So even in his early political kind of explorations, he was forming his own unique perspective, blending influences, but, ultimately forging his own path. He then dove headfirst into revolutionary activities, hoping to form the African National Congress Youth League, or the ANCYL.
Yeah. The ANCYL was like a platform for young activists like Mandela to kind of mobilize against these increasingly oppressive apartheid laws. It really marked a shift towards a more radical approach.
Right. And it's around this time that he became fascinated by Fidel Castro and the 26th of July movement in the Cuban Revolution.
Okay. Yeah. That fascination with revolutionary movements, particularly those advocating armed struggle, influenced his next significant move. Co-founding Mkhonto weSizwe, or MK, which became the ANC's armed wing.
Right. So they were sabotaging government infrastructure.
Yeah.
Which was a very, risky and controversial strategy.
Yeah. It's a period that's often debated, right? I mean, the use of violence in any struggle is complex.
Yeah.
The ANC argued that it was a necessary response to the state-sanctioned violence of the apartheid regime.
Right. And Mandela's relationship with the Communist Party during this period is still somewhat shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
Some argue he was a member, others say he wasn't.
Yeah. It's a debate that continues today. Both the South African Communist Party and the ANC have claimed that Mandela was a member and even served on their central committee. But this wasn't widely acknowledged during his lifetime.
Right. Maybe it was a strategic decision to downplay those connections during the transition to a democratic South Africa.
Could be.
But in 1962, Mandela embarked on what's described as an African tour. So this wasn't, a sightseeing tour or anything.
Right.
He was traveling secretly through various African countries, meeting with leaders like Julius Nyerere in Tanzania, Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt. He was seeking support for the ANC's cause.
Yeah, he was drumming up support, gathering resources, and learning from other liberation movements, too. He even secured funds for weaponry from leaders in Tunisia and Guinea. It shows how connected the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid movements were across the continent. They were sharing tactics, resources, inspiration.
Yeah, but this tour, unfortunately, marked the beginning of a very dark chapter for Mandela. He was arrested in South Africa in 1962, and there's a layer of intrigue surrounding that arrest.
There is. It was later revealed that the CIA had tipped off the South African police about Mandela's location, seeing him as a communist threat. This arrest led to the infamous Rivonia trial,
Oh, right.
which became a platform for Mandela to really articulate the ANC's vision.
Right. So he used his defense statement to denounce the injustices of apartheid
Yeah.
and lay out the ANC's moral and political justification for their actions, knowing that he faced a potential death sentence.
Wow. That's incredible courage. The court didn't impose the death penalty, but they sentenced him to life imprisonment, beginning his 27-year journey through the South African prison system.
Wow. So his first stop was the notorious Robben Island, where he endured harsh conditions breaking rocks in the quarry. But even in those circumstances, he never lost his spirit or his determination.
He used his time to study law, earning a degree from the University of London through correspondence courses.
Really?
Yeah. He also continued to correspond with other activists and leaders, maintaining his political influence.
Wow. So he was a prisoner, yet he never lost his spirit, his determination.
Exactly.
He even managed to connect with some of the guards on Robben Island. It's like his charisma just transcended those divides.
Yeah.
He was later transferred to Pollsmoor Prison in 1982.
Right. Pollsmoor was considered a more comfortable prison, but it also offered less opportunity for interaction with other political prisoners.
Right.
It was a strategic move by the apartheid government to isolate him and limit his influence.
Okay. But they underestimated his resilience.
Yeah.
He became the patron of the United Democratic Front, a multiracial organization fighting against apartheid. The 1980s were a very turbulent time in South Africa. The violence escalated, and the international pressure on the apartheid regime was intensifying.
Yeah, it was clear that something had to change. And Nelson Mandela, even behind bars, was becoming a key figure in that push for change.
Absolutely. So in 1985, he received an offer of release from President Botha
Oh, wow.
on the condition that he renounce violence.
It was a shrewd tactic, really, to try to portray the ANC as the aggressors.
Right.
Yeah.
But Mandela refused, famously saying, "Only free men can negotiate,"
Right.
which just, solidified his position as a leader.
Yeah.
As the 80s progressed, the pressure on the South African government to release him only grew. The world was watching.
The economic sanctions were biting, and the moral outrage against apartheid was reaching a crescendo.
Totally, yeah. So in 1988, he was moved to Victor Verster Prison. He was no longer in solitary confinement and was allowed to receive visitors more easily.
Yeah, it was a sign that the tide was turning.
Right.
The walls were literally closing in on apartheid.
And then in 1990, Nelson Mandela walked free.
Yeah.
After 27 years of imprisonment, he emerged as a symbol of hope. What an incredible moment in history, right?
It was. It was a moment of pure joy and relief for millions around the world. His first speech after release was a call for peace and reconciliation, but also a reminder that the struggle wasn't over.
Right. So he acknowledged the need for negotiation and compromise, but was clear that the ANC would continue to fight for the rights of all South Africans.
Yeah, it was a delicate balance. And he walked that line with such grace and conviction.
Absolutely.
So he embarked on another whirlwind tour, this time as a free man, meeting with world leaders from François Mitterrand in France to Margaret Thatcher in the UK.
Right. It was like a global victory lap, rallying international support for dismantling apartheid. Domestically, he focused on rebuilding the ANC, uniting the organization after years of operating underground or in exile.
Yeah, it was a challenging period, navigating internal divisions within the ANC and external threats from groups opposing a peaceful transition.
Right. And then came the negotiations with the government. Kudesa talks the push for a new constitution and the first multiracial elections in South Africa's history.
Yeah. Mandela led the way with incredible strength, wisdom, and a profound commitment to reconciliation despite his age and the weight of expectations.
His presidency from 1994 to 1999 was a pivotal era in South Africa. He inherited a nation deeply scarred by decades of racial segregation and oppression, and he had the monumental task of steering it toward a more just and equitable future.
The challenges were immense. The country was teetering on the brink of civil war, the economy was in shambles, and there was deep mistrust between different racial groups. It's hard to imagine anyone else with the strength and vision to guide South Africa through such a turbulent transition.
One of his most significant achievements was his unwavering commitment to national reconciliation. He recognized that true healing required acknowledging the pain of the past while working towards a shared future. He even met with former oppressors like apartheid-era leaders, seeking forgiveness and understanding.
It was a strategic decision as well. By extending a hand to the white minority, he eased their fears about a vengeful black majority government, helping to smooth the transition to a multiracial democracy.
He understood that lasting peace required more than just a transfer of power. It required a fundamental shift in attitudes and perceptions. The 1995 Rugby World Cup is a prime example of Mandela's genius for using symbolism to promote unity.
It was a masterstroke of political strategy. The Springboks, the South African national rugby team, had long been a symbol of white supremacy and Afrikaner nationalism. By publicly supporting the team and wearing their jersey, Mandela sent a powerful message of inclusivity and national pride.
Yeah, and it worked. The whole country, black and white, rallied behind the Springboks, and their victory against New Zealand became a powerful symbol of a nation coming together. It was a moment of euphoria that transcended racial divides.
It's fascinating how Mandela's personal life intertwined with his political role during his presidency. Despite his immense stature as a global icon, he maintained a remarkably simple lifestyle. He lived in a modest house instead of the opulent presidential residence and donated a significant portion of his salary to charity.
He wanted to show that he was a man of the people, not corrupted by power. He also had a very unique relationship with the media. He understood its power and used it effectively to communicate his message of reconciliation and hope. But he was also critical, especially when he felt it was sensationalizing crime or exploiting racial tensions.
Right. He held the media accountable, challenging them to be more responsible and constructive in their reporting. It's a valuable lesson for any leader, especially in today's age of social media and information overload.
Mandela was a staunch advocate for human rights and a vocal critic of oppression in foreign policy. He used his platform to condemn injustice and call for peaceful resolution of conflicts around the world.
He played a significant role in mediating disputes, particularly in Africa. He saw South Africa as a beacon of hope, a model for other nations struggling with their own legacies of conflict and oppression.
But his foreign policy wasn't without controversy. He faced criticism for maintaining close relationships with leaders like Fidel Castro, Muammar Gaddafi, and Indonesia's Suharto, all of whom had questionable human rights records.
His stance was that dialogue was crucial, even with those who held different views or had committed past atrocities. He believed in engaging with everyone seeking common ground and understanding. He argued that isolating these leaders would be counterproductive, that it was better to work with them to promote positive change.
It's a perspective that certainly sparks debate, but it's consistent with his overall philosophy of reconciliation and forgiveness.
Indeed, and it's important to remember that his foreign policy, just like his domestic policy, was shaped by his experiences and his understanding of the interconnectedness of global politics. He saw South Africa's liberation as part of a larger struggle for human rights and dignity for all people.
After 5 years as president, he stepped down, paving the way for Thabo Mbeki. It was a decision that surprised many, but it was in keeping with his belief in democratic principles and the peaceful transfer of power.
He didn't cling to power. He understood the importance of setting a precedent for future leaders.
Yeah, he could have easily held on to the presidency for another term, but he chose to step aside, allowing the next generation to take the reins. It was a testament to his commitment to building a lasting democracy. Even after leaving office, he continued to be a vocal advocate for peace, equality, and justice.
Even in retirement, he remained a powerful voice on the global stage, speaking out against injustice and calling for action on issues like poverty, HIV/AIDS, and climate change.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here with Mandela's Wikipedia page. It's amazing how much detail is packed into this single article. Before we move on to the other sources, let's take a moment to digest what we've learned. What stands out to you the most about Mandela's story so far?
His unwavering commitment to his principles even in the face of immense adversity. He spent 27 years in prison, yet he emerged not filled with bitterness, but with a desire to heal and unite his nation. He could have easily sought revenge, but he chose the path of reconciliation. That's true leadership.
I completely agree. It's his capacity for forgiveness that really amazes me. It's something we could all learn from, especially in today's world, where division and anger seem to be everywhere. Now let's shift gears a bit and hear what Olivia Chow has to say about Mandela's legacy. There's a short clip from a tribute she gave back in 2013, just a few months after his passing.
So we've kind of journeyed through Mandela's life, from his rural upbringing to his time as a revolutionary to his iconic presidency and beyond.
And we've seen how his story is kind of interwoven with, global politics, personal struggles, and a constant drive for justice.
Yeah, it's really been an immersive experience. It's like we've gotten to know Mandela on a deeper level through these sources. Yeah, that's the power of the activist archives, right? It's not just about dry historical facts. It's about understanding the human story behind the movements, the struggles, and the triumphs.
Exactly. So as we kind of wrap things up, what are some of the key takeaways that you think um, our listeners should walk away with from this deep dive?
Well, I think firstly, Mandela's life demonstrates the incredible power of resilience.
Yeah.
He faced unimaginable hardship, yet he never gave up on his vision for a free and
Wow.
equal South Africa.
Right. I mean, he was in prison for 27 years.
Yeah.
And he came out ready to forgive, to build bridges, to unite a nation. I mean, that's a level of strength and compassion that's just truly awe-inspiring.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that change takes time, right? I mean, Mandela's struggle against apartheid spanned decades. It was a long and arduous journey filled with setbacks and triumphs. But he never lost sight of his goal, and he inspired millions along the way.
Yeah, I mean, his story is really a testament to the power of persistence. It's like never giving up on your ideals, even when the odds seem like insurmountable.
Yeah.
It's a lesson that's relevant, for any challenge we face, whether it's, personal or political.
Absolutely. Another key takeaway, I think, is the importance of reconciliation.
Right.
Mandela understood that a truly free South Africa required healing the wounds of the past. He chose forgiveness over revenge, unity over division.
Yeah, his leadership during that transition to democracy was like a masterclass in bridge building and finding common ground.
Yeah.
He showed the world that it's possible to move forward from even the most like horrific of conflicts, to find a way to coexist peacefully.
Right. And finally, I think it's important to remember that Mandela's legacy is not just about him.
Yeah.
It's about the countless individuals who fought alongside him, who sacrificed, who suffered, who persevered.
Right, right. It's about the power of collective action, of, ordinary people coming together to create extraordinary change. I mean, Mandela was a symbol of that movement, but he was always quick to acknowledge that he was part of a larger struggle, that he stood on the shoulders of those who came before him.
Yeah, that's something we should all reflect on. What role can we play in carrying forward that legacy of fighting for justice, equality, and a better world for all?
It's a question that Olivia Chow's tribute really like brought to the forefront for me. We can all be part of Mandela's legacy, not just by, remembering him, but by taking action in our own lives, in our own communities.
Exactly. Whether it's speaking out against injustice, volunteering our time, or simply treating others with kindness and respect, we can all contribute to making his vision a reality.
And speaking of Mandela's vision, his written works offer like even deeper insights into his thoughts and beliefs. The article from the History Channel highlights his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, which is considered a classic.
Yeah. I mean, his writings provide context and a level of personal reflection that you don't often get from historical accounts.
Right. It's like, having a conversation with him across time. It makes me want to go back and reread his work to see how, like, my understanding of him might have changed over the years.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of exploring someone's written legacy, right? It allows you to engage with their ideas on a deeper level, to connect with them on a more personal level.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay.
It's a quote from Mandela himself that really captures his spirit and his message to the world. It always seems impossible until it's done.
Powerful words. And a fitting end to our exploration of this remarkable life, yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey into the activist archives. We'll see you next time on the Deep Dive.